Hello everybody, my name is Ghost Bunny and I'm going to be reading chapter 3 of Have No Social Blessing, also known as TGCF. This is I have no affiliations with 7Cs or with MXCX for starters. I'm just reading this for funsies, and if you want to follow along, great. Welcome along. And also, the disclaimer número dos, I am not a native Chinese speaker. So there will be names that I will probably mispronounce. I don't do this on purpose. I'm not trying to make fun of or belittle or, make a mockery of the Chinese language. I just sadly enough do not speak it. So yeah, some, if not, I think more than half the pronunciations of things will be wrong. And even though, yes, I can speak English, for some reason when it comes to reading, there will be mistakes. So sorry about that. I also add a little bit of mwah into this, so you'll be hearing a lot of me commenting because I like getting into the books. I like, being part of the book. So yeah, those are all my disclaimers. I think. Oh yeah, by the way, Happy New Year's. First TGCF video of the year. Sorry, it's been a while. This book is very long. But other than that, yeah, I say that, but most of the books I'm reading are quite long. So what's my actual excuse? Nothing. But yeah, I feel like a podcaster now. This feels like a podcast. ASMR. Okay, whatever. Let's begin. Chapter 3. Get yourself ready because this chapter is quite long. It's called The Ghost Takes a Bride. The Crown Prince mounts the bridal sedan. Does not mount the prince, sadly enough. Let's go. One of the sedan carriers wasn't paying attention and stepped on an arm. He screamed without thinking, and then immediately the entire wedding procession was in an uproar. Good Lord, that band of men whipped out their shearing broadswords. They yelled, "What's the matter? Has it come?" Commotion had broken out in the street. When Shilian looked closely, the body was, with its head severed, wasn't a real body, a real person, but a wooden puppet. Too ugly, Fu Yao commented again. The tea master just happened to be coming over with the copper teapot. Shilian recalled his attitude yesterday, so he asked, "Shopkeeper, I saw that group of people banging drums and gongs yesterday, and I see them doing the same thing again today. What are they doing?" "Seeking their own ruin," the tea master said. Shilian wasn't surprised. "Are they trying to lure the ghost groom?" "What do you think?" the tea master replied. "The father of a missing bride will award a great sum of money to whomever finds the daughter and captures the ghost groom. So that group has been messing around all day, every day, creating a foul atmosphere. The father who was awarding the bounty must be the Lord official." Shilian took another glance at the crassly built head of a woman. Knowing the men were attempting to disguise the puppet as a bride, Fu Yao commented in disgust, "If I were the ghost groom, I'd wipe out the entire troop for sending such an ugly thing to me." "Fu Yao, you're not speaking as an immortal should," Shilian said. "And can you fix that eye-rolling habit of yours? Why don't you set a small target for yourself first and roll only 5 times a day or something like that?" "Set it 50 times a day and I still won't be enough," Namfeng added. Just then, a young man suddenly poked out from the procession, spunky and spirited. Judging by sight, he was the leader. He raised his arm and hollered, Listen to me! It's completely useless to keep this up. How many times have we made this trip in the past few days? Has the ghost cream ever showed the fuck up? No." The group of men agreed and started to grumble while the youth continued. I think since we started this, we should just do it and charge right up Mount Eugen. We'll search the mountain and drag that ugly freak out to kill it. I'll lead the way. Any good, brave man can follow me. Kill that ugly freak and we'll split the bounty. There were only a small, and scattered number of men at first who answered his call, but the voices gradually grew bigger and louder. In the end, everyone was roaring in agreement. Surprised! There were only a small and scattered number of men at first who answered his call, but the voices gradually grew bigger and louder. In the end, everyone was roaring in agreement, surprisingly sounding rather immense in strength. Shilian wondered, Ugly freak? Shopkeeper, what's the ugly freak they're talking about? The tea master replied, Apparently the ghost groom is an ugly creature from living in the mountain, in Mount Eugen, and because it's so goddamn ugly, no woman loves it. That's why it grew hate in his heart and began robbing others of their brides to ruin their happiness, their happy occasion. The scroll from the palace of Ling Wen didn't record this. Shilian wondered, is that explanation true? Is it not speculation? Who knows? The tea master replied. Apparently quite a few people have seen it. Its entire face is wrapped in bandages with savage eyes peering out. It doesn't know how to talk and can only growl like a wolfhound. The rumors are quite bizarre. Okay, but just because its face is bandaged doesn't mean it's ugly. There's also the possibility that it's so beautiful that it doesn't want others to see it, Fu Yao said. The tea master was speechless for a moment. Who knows? Either way, I've never seen that thing. Right then, a young girl's voice came from the street. Don't listen to him. Don't go. Mount Eugen is a very dangerous place. The one who spoke while hiding at a street corner was the girl who was praying for, blessings at the temple of Nanyang last night. Xiao Ying. When Shilian saw her face, he could feel his own aching and subconscious rubbed his cheek. That youth appeared grim when he saw her, and he shoved her. What's a little woman doing interrupting when the big men are talking? Xiao Ying cowered a little when she was shoved, but then she gathered her courage and said in a small voice, Don't listen to him. Whether it's faking a wedding procession or searching the mountain, aren't you all seeking your own deaths by doing something so dangerous? Well, don't you make it sound nice, the youth rebuked. Us guys are putting our lives on the line to exterminate evil for the people. But what about you? Selfish and greedy, refusing to play the role of a fake bride, and yet on the sedan, get your ass in the sedan. You don't have half the courage of the people here. But now, you're here to obstruct us? What are you scheming? He shoved her with every word, making everyone inside the shop frown at the sight. Shilian looked down and unwrapped the bandage on his wrist as he heard the tea master speak. That Xiao Pengtou wanted to coax the girl into playing the fake bride before his words, sweet little honey, but the girl refused, so now he's changed face. On the street, a group of burly men also exclaimed, Stop standing there blocking our way, move aside. When Xiao Ying saw this, her flat face was flushed bright red, tears rolling in her eyes. Why must you talk like this? The youth, Xiao Pengtou, continued. Was I wrong? I told you to play the fake bride, and did you not refuse? Xiao Ying replied. It's true that I didn't dare to do it, but you didn't have to slash my dress. The moment she mentioned this, Xiao Pengtou instantly jumped as if he stumped his toe. He pointed at her face and yelled, You ugly freak! Don't slander people like that. Me? Touch your dress? Are you taking me for blind? Who knows if you didn't do it yourself because you wanted to flash people? You pervert. As if people would want to see an ugly face like yours, even with a ripped dress. Don't blame me for this. Nanfeng couldn't bear to listen anymore, and the teacup shattered in his hand with a crack. Just as he was about to stand up, however, a white silhouette drifted past. At the same time, Xiaoping was just jumping at a foot, yelping and fell on his butt on the ground, holding his face while blood dripped from between the cracks of his finger. No one in the crowd had a chance to see what exactly happened before the boy was already sitting on the ground. At first, they thought it was Xiao Ying who went berserk. Yet, they looked at her. They couldn't actually see her, but like a white-clad cultivator had come and shielded her. Zhilian tucked his hand in his sleeves, not bothering to look back. He grinned happily at Xiao Ying, bending slightly at the waist to meet her eyes. Miss, I was wondering if I might have the pleasure of inviting you inside for a cup of tea. Xiaoping Tou was sprawled on the ground. His mouth and nose were excruciating pain. His entire face was in agony, as if he had just been cracked brutally by a steel whip. Yet, the cultivator clearly didn't carry any weapons, nor did Xiaoping Tou, seeing how the man had struck on or what he had used to strike. He scrambled to crawl up brandishing his blade, and yelled, "This man! He used wicked magic! You witch!" When the group of burly men behind him heard wicked magic, they all brandished their brand swords. Yet, unexpectedly, Nanfeng suddenly struck with his hand from behind, and crack! A pillar snapped and broke. Having witnessed such godly strength, the group of burly men instantly lost color in their face. Although stricken with fear, Xiaoping Tou still remained stubborn and shouted at them as he ran away. "I'll concede defeat today, okay? But when did you fellow good men come from? Where did you come from? Leave your names and we'll meet again someday. It's not the end of me, okay? I'll fight. Just not now, but later. Just name, okay?" Nanfeng didn't even care to answer him, but next to him, Fu Yao replied, "Very kind, very kind. This one is from the temple of Nanfeng struck out another hand, and those two began to sprawl soundlessly. Shenlian wanted to invite the little maiden, in to sit for a bit at first, order some fruit tea or something. Yet before he could, she walked off, on her own while wiping away her tears. He sighed, watching that retreating back then he went back by himself. When he entered the tea shop, the tea master chided, "Remember to pay for that pillar, by the way. It costs money." Thus, when Shenlian sat down, he turned to Nanfeng. "Remember to pay for that pillar, by the way. It costs money." ... replied Nanfeng. "Before that, let's focus on proper business," Shenlian said. "Who can lend me some spiritual powers? I need to enter the communication array to verify some information." Nanfeng raised his hand, and the two clapped palms as an oath, counting it as a binding and extremely simple contract. Thus Shenlian could finally enter the communication array once more. The moment he entered, he heard Ling Wen say, "Your Highness finally managed to borrow some spiritual powers. Is everything in the north going well? Were the junior martial officials who volunteered themselves any help?" Shenlian looked up and glanced at the pillar Nanfeng snapped with his palm earlier. Then he glanced at Fu Yao, who was currently resting with his eyes closed, wearing a cold and distant expression. Then he replied, "The two junior martial officials both have their own values, and they're talented, they're worth nurturing." Ling Wen chuckled. Then we must congratulate General Nanyang and General Xuanzhen. On your Highness's word, the future of those junior martial officials must be infinite, and they will soon ascend themselves. It wasn't long before Mu Qing's voice surfaced coldly. He didn't inform me of this outgoing, so let him be. Either way, I don't know anything. You really are lurking in the communication array all day, Shilian thought. Your Highness, Lingwen said. Where have you settled? The north is guarded by General Pei. His worshippers are abundant. If your Highness has any need, you can stay temporarily in the temple of Mingang. There is no need for the trouble, Shilian replied. We didn't find the temple of Mingguang, Jesus. In the temple of Mingguang nearby, so we sought the temple of Nanyang. A quick question, Lingwen, about the ghost groom. Do you have any more information? Yes, Lingwen replied. The result of its rank evaluation, was just preceded by my palace. It's a wrath. A what? A wrath. I heard you. A wrath? Yes. In regard to the monsters, demons, and ghosts that caused great turmoil within the mortal realm, the palace of Lingwen had categorized them based on their abilities. The ranks were as follows: fierce, malice, wrath, and supreme. A fierce murdered one, a malice could murder a sect, a wrath could slaughter an entire city. As for the most fearsome supremes, once they were born into the world, they were destined to bring ruin to the nations and people and complete disorder everywhere. The ghost groom that had been holding up in Mount Yujin, it was ranked a wrath, only one level lower than a supreme. That meant no one who saw it could escape, basically. Thus, after Shilian exited the communication array and informed the other two of this, Nanfeng said, Then the ugly bandaged male was probably just a rumor, or they saw someone else. There's another possibility, Shilian said. For example, under certain circumstances, the ghost groom will not or cannot cause harm. Fu Yao said disapprovingly. The palace of Lingwen is so inefficient. Taking as long only to come up with a rank? What's the use? At the very least, we have an understanding of the enemy's strength, Shilian said. But since this is a wrath, the ghost groom, spiritual power must be very strong. And a fake puppet will not be able to deceive it at all. If we want to lure it out, then we can't cast a camouflage spell on, a puppet for the wedding presenters, and we can't carry weapons either. The most important thing is the bride must be a living person. Okay, well, we'll just find a woman in the streets to use as bait, Fu Yao said. Nanfeng, however, rejected the idea. No. Why not? Fu Yao said. Think about it. They'll be unwilling. Give them a sum of money and they'll be willing. Fu Yao, even if there are women who are willing, it's best if we don't employ this method, Shilian said. This ghost groom is a wrath. If there are any mishaps, nothing will happen to us. But if the bride is kidnapped, a meek woman won't be able to escape or fight back, so it's certain death for her. If you can't use a woman, then we have to use men? Fu Yao said. Nanfeng said, Where are you going to find a man who's willing to... ... He trailed off, and the two gazed over. Shilian was sitting there, just smiling. That night. Nighttime, the temple of Nanyang. Shilian emerged from behind the back of the temple, with his hair down and flowing, looking disheveled. The two standing guard by the temple entrance looked, and Nanfeng swore. Fuck! Right on the spot before charging out. Shilian was speechless for a moment, then said, Okay, was that necessary? Rude. No matter who looked, they could tell with just one glance that this was a handsome man with gentle brows. But this was precisely the reason why many would be unable to, stand the image of a perfectly good, handsome man wearing a woman's wedding dress. And I'm going to screenshot the beautiful image. Right now it should be on screen. And I don't think it looks bad. It's not that much. Looks okay. You guys are just judgmental. Meanies. Either way, Nanfeng, for example, couldn't bear it at all, which was why his reaction was so extreme. Shen saw Fu Yao was still standing there, scanning him up and down with a complicated look. He asked, "Is there anything you wish to say?" Fu Yao nodded. "If I were the ghost groom and someone sent a woman looking like this to me..." "Let me guess, you'd wipe the entire town, was it?" Shilian finished for him. Fu Yao replied, frightenedly. "No, why kill the woman too?" Ta-da! Equality. Shilian smiled. Then I can only say, thank goodness I'm not a woman," Fu Yao said. "I think, why don't you go ask, in the communication array to see if there is any heavenly official who is willing to teach you transformation magic? That would be more practical." There certainly were several heavenly officials who, on account of their own unique needs, knew transformation magic. However, it was probably too late to learn now. However, over on the other side, Nanfeng came back in with a gloomy face. He was much calmer after having sworn, a trait that was surely entirely the same as the general he served. Seeing it was getting late, Shilian said, "Okay, whatever. It's all the same when the veil goes on anyways." He was about to put the covering on when Fu Yao raised a hand and stopped him. "Hang on. You don't know how that ghost groom harms people. If he raises the veil and feels the seed, wouldn't that just provoke unnecessary trouble? Rage is unpredictable, and events can take unexpected turns." Shilian thought that made sense, but he took a step. He heard a rip. Uh-oh. His red wedding dress Fu Yao got him really didn't fit that well. A woman's form was much more daintier after he put on the dress, while his waist was surprisingly just fine. He was severely restricted in, raising his arms and lifting his feet. When the movement was too wide, the robes ripped. Just as he was looking everywhere to see where the fabric was torn, a voice came from the entrance of the temple. "Excuse me?" The three looked to the source of the sound and saw Xiao Ying, holding a properly folded white robe in her hand while standing at the entrance of the temple. She was watching them with trepidation. "I remembered it was here when I met you, so I wanted to come over to see if I'd run into you again," Xiao Ying said. "I've washed these clothes. I'll put them here. Thanks so much for yesterday and today." Shilian was just going to smile in response when he suddenly remembered his own appearance and decided it was best if he, didn't speak to scare people. Yet, unexpectedly, not only was Xiao Ying not frightened, she took another step forward. "Are you..." "If you like, I can help you." No, miss. Please don't misunderstand. This isn't a hobby of mine," Shilian explained. Xiao Ying quickly replied, I know. What I meant was, I can help you, if you don't mind. You guys are going to go catch the ghost groom, right?" Phew, she didn't think I was a crossdresser, thank goodness. Her voice and her expressions both lifted instantly. I know how to tailor clothes. I've got needles and threads on me at all times. I can help fix anywhere that doesn't, fit. And I can even help with makeup. Just let me help you. ... Till incense time passed, and Shilian once again emerged from the back of the temple with his head down. This time, the bridal veil was already in place. Nanfeng and Fu Yao had wanted to take a look at first, but in the end they decided to cherish their eyes. The sedan they called over was already waiting by the entrance of the temple, and the carefully selected sedan carriers had also been waiting for a long time. It was a night where the moon was obscured, and the winds raised. Adorned in a brand new wedding dress, the crown prince thus mounted the bright red bridal sedan. The entire body of the bridal sedan was dressed in bright red satin, which was embroidered with colored threads spelling the words blooming flowers and full moon. And dragon and phoenix bring prosperity, idioms meaning perfect happiness and extremely good fortune. Nanfeng and Fu Yao were on the right and left respectively, escorting the bridal sedan on either side. Shilian sat poised within the sedan, swaying along with the movement of the sedan's carrier. The 8 sedan carriers carrying the large palanquin were all outstanding military officers. In order to find expertly skilled sedan carriers to play the part of the wedding procession, and demonstrated their power, then revealed that they planned to probe Mount Yujin that night. Without a word, the officials summoned a squad of big, tall military officers. However, it wasn't in the hope of extra help that they expertly skilled were chosen. Rather, it was so that when the wrath ghost launched attacks, they could run away and protect themselves. But in truth, it's actually those 8 military officers who were secretly looking down on them. They were the top number 1 experts at the government office, and leaders of the outstanding heroes wherever they went. Yet those 2 pretty boys were riding over their heads and had ordered them to be sedan carriers. It wouldn't be wrong to say they were quite upset. The master's orders had to be followed though, so they forcefully suppressed their disdain in their hearts. Nonetheless, it was difficult to avoid the frustration flaring up, so every so often they purposely jerked their leg or shake their hands, making the sedan quite bumpy. Others might not be able to tell, but if the one sitting inside the sedan was just a bit weaker and more delicate, they would have probably puked their guts out. Thank goodness we had Shilian, and that man's barely human, so huzzah! The sedan bumped, and sure enough, they heard Shilian inside the sedan let out a loud sigh. The military officers couldn't help but feel rather proud inwardly. Outside, Fu Yao said coldly, "What's the matter, miss? Tears of joy at finally marrying at your old age?" Indeed, when a bride left home for the first time, many teared up and wept at the bridal sedan. Shilian didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but when he spoke his voice was calm and natural, revealing nothing of the discomfort from the bumpy ride. "No, it's just I suddenly realized that this wedding procession is missing something very important." "Missing what?" Nanfeng asked. "We've prepared all we need," Shilian smiled. "2 accompanying maids." ... The 2 outside exchanged a look, then they both shuddered violently, seeming to have imagined something. Fu Yao replied, "Just pretend that the family's poor, that there's no money to buy maids, and deal with it." All right, Shilian said. When the sedan-carrying military officers heard all this gag, they couldn't help but chuckle. With this, the displeasure did indeed disperse quite a bit, and a bit more camaraderie developed, making the sedan much steadier. Thus Shilian leaned back into a proper sitting position and closed his eyes to rest his mind. Unexpectedly, not long after, a child's laughter abrupted sound by his ears. Hee hee, ha ha, kiki, kiki. The laughter rippled across the mountain, ethereal and peculiar. However, the bridal sedan neither paused nor stopped, continuing steady on its way. Not even Nanfeng or Fu Yao made a noise, seeming to not have noticed anything amiss. Shilian opened his eyes and called in a low voice, "Nanfeng, Fu Yao." From the left side of the bridal sedan, Nan Feng answered. What is it? Something's come, Shilin replied. By that time, this wine procession had gradually entered the deeper parts of Mount Yujun. Quiet blanketed the wilderness, and the creaking of the wood sedan, the creaking of broken leaves and branches when stepped on, the breathing of the sedan carriers, all seemed to sound louder in the silence. And that child's laughter still hadn't died. It was something distant, as if it came from deeper within the woods, and sometimes close, as if it was leaning over on the edge of the sedan. Dan Feng grew serious. I don't hear anything, Fu Yao also said coldly. Me neither. In that case, it was even more impossible for the sedan carriers to have heard anything. This means it's purposely letting only me hear it, Shilian said. The 8 military officers continued themselves experts in martial arts, and also felt there was no pattern of the ghost groom taking brides, so they were confident they would go home empty-handed tonight, and weren't frightened in the least. Yet, for some reason, the 40-some military officers from before, who mysteriously went missing delivering the bride, suddenly came to mind, and cold sweat appeared on some of their foreheads. Shilian sensed that some had stalled in their steps and said, Don't stop. Pretend nothing's in the matter. Nan Feng gestured for them to keep going. Shilian then said, It's singing. What's it singing? Fu Yao asked. Shilian listened carefully to the child's voice, then repeated verse by verse, and paused after each one. New bride, new bride, new bride in red bridals. Okay. New bride, new bride, new bride in red bridal sedan. In the quiet of the night, his somewhat slow voice was clear, but while he was clearly the one reciting, it was as if those 8 military officers were hearing the voice of a young infant singing this odd little nursery rhyme, along with Shilian, making their blood run cold. Shilian continued. Brimming tears past the hills, smile not under the bridal veil. The ghost, is it the ghost groom, or what is it? After a pause, Shilian said, No, he's laughing. I can't hear clearly anymore. Dan Feng frowned. What did that mean? It means exactly what you hear, Shilian said. It's to tell the bride inside the sedan to only cry and not smile. I meant, what's the meaning of this creature running over to give you hints like this? Sheesh. Always having the opposite opinion, Fu Yao said, I might not be giving hints. It's also possible that it's purposely trying to encourage the opposite, and only smiling can keep off safe and sound, but its objective is to trick people into crying. It's hard to say if the bride from the past were deceived like this. Oh, Fu Yao, when hearing such a voice on the road, any normal bride would be scared to death. How could they smile? Shilian said. Besides, what's the worst that could happen, whether I cry or smile? Oh, I don't know, maybe getting kidnapped, you dumb, Fu Yao said. And isn't that our objection for tonight anyways? Shilian asked. A hard sniff came out of Fu Yao's nose, but he stopped his rebuttals. Shilian continued. And there's another thing. I feel I must tell you both. What? Nanfen asked. I've been smiling ever since I mounted the bridal sedan, Shilian said. ... Just as he spoke, the body of the sedan abruptly dipped. There was suddenly a commotion outside among the 8 military officers, and the bridal sedan came to a complete stop. Nanfen shouted, Don't panic! Shilian raised his head slightly. What's going on? Fu Yao replied coldly, Nothing. We run into a bunch of beasts, that's all. Just as he answered, Shilian heard a sharp howl of wolves peering the night sky. A pack of wolves was blocking the way. Ow. This didn't feel normal no matter how Shilian thought about it. Quick question. Are there often wolves running about on Mount Yujun? One of the military officers carrying the sedan answered, It's unheard of before. How is this Mount Yujun? Shilian raised his brows. Then we've come to the right place. These were only wild wolves in the mountain. They were the only ones. They couldn't do anything to Nanfang or Fuyao, nor could they do anything to those military officers who spent years rolling around the edge of danger. It was just that they were all forced earlier on this deciphering the bizarre and eerie nursery rhyme, which was why they were so taken by surprise. From deep within the wood in the dark in the night, pairs and pairs of haunting green wolf eyes lit up. One starving wolf after another slowly emerged from within the forest surrounding them. However, it was so much better to face beasts one could see and hit than to face a creature could only not either see nor touch. And so the group started rubbing their hands and clenching their fists, ready to get down to slaying. Yes, Queen. However, the good part was yet to come. What followed closely behind the wolves was the sound of rustling and crackling, a series of odd noises that sounded like beasts, but not quite, and like humans, but not exactly human. A military officer exclaimed in alarm, What? What's that? What is that thing? Nanfang also cursed. Fuck! Shilian knew that something unexpected had happened and tried to stand. What's happening now? Nanfang immediately replied, Don't come out. Shilian had only just raised his hand when the sedan violently jolted, as if something had pressed against the sedan door. He didn't lower his head, but he dropped his eyes slightly, and from beneath the bridal veil, he saw the back of the head of something black. He had actually climbed into the sedan. That creature crashed headfirst through the sedan's door, but was then forcefully dragged out by the man outside. Nanfang swore in front of the sedan. Fuck, it's a Binu! Shilian knew this was going to be downright troublesome the moment he heard it was a Binu. Based on the evaluation of the palace of Lingwen, Binu were creatures that didn't even deserve to be ranked fierce. Allegedly, Binu were once human, but by the looks of them now, even if they were considered humans, they'd be deformed humans. They had heads and faces, but the features were smeared and unclear. They had arms and legs, but were too weak to walk. They had mouths and teeth, but they couldn't bite anyone to death, no matter how much they tried. And they did, in fact, try very hard. It was actually kind of a little bit sad and a little bit pathetic. No offense. But if there was a choice, everyone would rather run into the scarier, fiercer, or malice-ring ghosts than these creatures. This was because Binu often appeared at the same time as other monsters, demons, and ghosts, while their prey was distracted, batting with the enemy. They'd suddenly pop out and use their untiring their limbs. Their sticky and gooey bodily fluids, and their endless reinforcements of companions to tangle up their prey, like sticky candy, even though their combat power was extremely low, because, they became their vitality was exchanged. Tenacious, and they often appeared in large groups. So they were weak, so they just came in groups. That's basically it. One, we're weak, many, we are strong. That type of stuff. But yeah. It was impossible to shake them off, and also very difficult to kill them all quickly. Gradually, they would train your strength, and you would get tired up. Gradually, they would... Yeah, I read that. That instance of carelessness, the opportunity for which your enemy was waiting, would spell your end. And when the prey was killed by the other monsters, demons, and ghosts, the Binu would pick out the remnant broken limbs the stronger being left over after eating. So after the strong ones ate, the Binu would eat what was left, the remnants of the you, basically. But oh yeah. They'd eat with keen pleasure and gnaw the bones full of holes and scraps. This was truly a very disgusting creature for any heavenly official in the upper court. All they needed to do was to release their spiritual light, and summon their weapons, and those creatures would withdraw in fright. But to the junior officials of the middle court, those creatures were extremely vexing. Yeah, you get it. Fu Yao spat with disgust from a far distance. I hate those things. Did the palace of Ling Wen mention their presence here? No, Shilian said. Then what do we need them for? Fu Yao exclaimed. How many have come? Shilian said. About 100, possibly more, Nanfei replied. Don't come at me. Creatures like Binu were strong in number, and over 1,000 were already difficult to manage. Over 100? That was more than enough to drag them to their death. They usually preferred to stay in, areas heavily populated with people. He had never imagined there'd be so many at Mount Yujun. Shilian pondered for a moment, then raised his arm slightly, revealing a wrist that was half wrapped in bandages. Go on. The moment those two words were spoken, that white bandage suddenly slipped off his wrist on its own, like it was alive, and flew out of the curtain of the bridal sedan. Shilian sat poised within the sedan and instructed gently, strangle them to death. In the black of the night, it was as if the white silhouette of a viper suddenly slithered forth. So basically he went, kill them. Ta-da! When that white silk band was pretending to be a bandage wrapped around Shilian's wrist, it looked like it was only several meters long. Yet, when it was slaughtering with such devilish delight or lightning speed, it was like it was endless. A seamless series of crackling sounds later, dozens of wild wolves and Binu had their necks wrung in an instant. The 6 Binu wrapped around Nanfei instantly fell to the ground dead. He sent a wild wolf flying with the strike of a hand, never dropping his guard once. He shouted with disbelief towards the sedan. What was that thing? Didn't you say you couldn't manipulate spiritual devices without spiritual power? Shannon replied. Yeah, well, there's always an exception, so sucks to be you, I guess. Nanfei was furious as he slapped the sedan door. Shilian, explain properly right now what that was that. What was it? His slap almost broke the entire sedan completely. Shilian had to quickly raise his hand to support himself against the door, slightly taken aback. The way Nanfei spoke actually reminded him of how Feng Xing used to be when he was mad. Nanfei was about to say more when suddenly the wailing of military officers came from the distance. Fu Yao said icily, if there's anything to say it after fighting. This wave off first, okay? Without any choice, Nanfei had to rush over to rescue the people. Shilian swiftly snapped out of it and ordered Nanfei, Fu Yao, you guys leave first. Nanfei whipped his head around. What? Shilian explained. If you guys are around the sedan, the creatures will keep coming and the fight will never end. Take the man away first. I'll stay behind and meet this groom. Nanfei was about to swear again. Okay, but you'll be by yourself, you know that, right? However, Fu Yao said coldly, he can control that silk band thingamabob, so nothing will happen for the moment. If you've got the time to drag your feet, why don't you settle this group first, then come back and help him off, okay? Okay? Well, he certainly was snappy and carefree, leaving without a thought, dragging not a single step. Nan Feng clenched his teeth, knowing what Fu Yao said was true, so he returned to the military officers who were there. "Come with me first." Sure enough, after they left, the bridle sat down while the pack of wolves and Binu were still pestering them. There weren't any new waves joining the fray. The two each escorted 4 military officers, and on the way Fu Yao fought as he spat hatefully. "I can't believe this. If it wasn't for—" he stopped mid-speech. The two met eyes, and the look was odd. Fu Yao swallowed his words and turned his head away, both temporarily stopping and not bringing it up. They then continued to hurry forward. Around the bridal sedan, corpses were strewn all over the ground. The silk band Roye had already strangled every wolf and Binu that had lunged forward. It came flying back, gently wrapping itself back into Shilian's wrist on its own. Shilian sat within the sedan quietly, surrounded by the infinite darkness and the rustling of the sea of trees. All of a sudden, everything fell quiet. The sound of wind, the sound of the sea of trees, the howling and roaring of demonic creatures, all sank into a deadly silence in an instant, as if they were afraid of something. And then he heard a very soft chuckle. It sounded like a man, but also a youth? Shilian said, poised and quiet. Ooh, get another photo. He's so pretty. Again, I will take a photo and put it here so you guys can see our beautiful Shilian, our beautiful prince, our crown prince of beauty. That's what the title should be. But yeah. The silk band Royer was quietly encircling his hand, ready to strike at a moment's notice. If whoever had come showed a trace of a killing aura, it would instantly wildly strike back with 10 times the power. Yet, unexpectedly, what came wasn't the anticipated attack of any murderous intent, but something else. The curtain of the bridal sedan was slightly lifted, and from underneath the bridal red veil, Shilian saw the person had extended a hand to him. The fingers were well defined. A red string was tied on the third finger, and on that long, slender, fair hand, it looked like a bright and colorful affinity knot. Should he give his hand or no? Shilian maintained his composure. He hadn't decided yet. Should he continue to sit still and, sit tall and still, or pretend to be a bride who was frightened and at loss, dodging back? The owner of that hand was rather patient, however, and incredibly well-mannered. Shilian didn't move, and so that hand didn't move either, seeming to be waiting for his response. A moment later, as if something had taken control of him, Shilian reached out. He rose to his feet, ready to push aside the curtain to descend the sedan, but the man had already moved first, lifting the red curtain for him. This man who had come grasped his hand, but didn't squeeze too hard, as if he wasn't afraid of hurting him. As if he was afraid of hurting him, somehow giving the impression of taking the utmost care. Shilian had his head bowed and let the man guide him slowly out of the sedan. Below the veil, Shilian could see by his feet the dead body of a wolf that the silk band Royer had strangled. An idea came to him, and Shilian lightly tripped, falling forward with an alarmed gasp. The man immediately reached out and caught him. Shilian also twisted his hand to catch the man's helping arm, and felt something cold. It turned out the man was wearing a pair of silver vambraces around his wrists. The vambraces were exquisitely beautiful, with primitive decorative pattern. Maple leaves, butterflies, and savage beasts were engraved upon them, quite mysterious and quite unlike anything from the Central Plains, more akin to the ancient artifacts of foreign tribes. The band bracelets appeared polished and refined, locked around the man's wrist. Icy cold silver and fairy white hands, both were without a trace of life, but carried an evil killing aura. Okay. Lian tripped and fell. Earlier was a feint he had in mind to test this man who'd come. Royer had been circling languidly inside the large, expansive sleeve, as if his wedding robes ready to strike at a moment's notice. However, the man only took his hand and guided him forward. Lian purposely walked extremely slowly. This was because, 1. He couldn't see the path clearly with the veil on, and 2. He wanted to stall for time. Yet this other person matched his pace and walked slowly along with him, the other arm coming around to support him, every now and then, as if afraid Lian would trip again. No matter how high on his guard Lian was, to be treated this way, he couldn't help but think, if he was a real groom, then he'd generally be a most gentle and considerate one. Then he suddenly heard an exceedingly soft clanging sound. With every step that they took, the sound would ring crisply. Just as he was mulling over what the sound could be, there was suddenly a low, suppressed growls of wild beasts from all around. Wild wolves! Lian jerked slightly, and then the silk band Royer abruptly snapped tight around his waist. Yet, unexpectedly, before he could do anything, the man who was holding his hand softly tapped the back of the hand, like he was comforting him, telling him not to worry. The 2 taps were so soft they could practically be called gentle. Lian was slightly taken aback, but the low growling was already suppressed. When Lian listened closely, he suddenly realized that these wild wolves weren't growling but whimpering. It was clearly the whimpering of beasts that had reached the peak of fear and could not move while they struggled before death. Now his curiosity for whom this man was grew even stronger. He wanted to lift the veil to look first and worry about everything else later, but he knew that wasn't the best course of action, at the moment at least. So he could only peek through the crack below the red covering, his view limited and missed the larger picture, so he could barely see. The only thing he saw was the lower hem of the vividly red robe. Below the red robe was a pair of black leather boots, walking languidly. The black leather boots were wrapped tight around long, slender legs, looking mighty beautiful as they walked. On the sides of the black boots there were 2 fine silver chains dangling, and with every step the silver chains would sway, clinking and crickling, sounding extremely pleasant to the ear. The steps were nonchalant but springy, much like those of a youth. However, his very step was also confident, like there was nothing that could stand in his way. If anyone dared to block him, he'd rip them to pieces. Because of this, Lian couldn't quite say just who exactly this character was. Just as he was deep in thought, something hauntingly white on the ground suddenly intruded on his vision. Yeah, it was a skull. Lian faltered for a moment. He couldn't immediately tell that the way the skull was placed was amiss. This was clearly a point in some magic formation, and if moved, the entire enchantment would probably attack the spot in an instant. But judging by the youth's step, it was as if he didn't notice there was anything there at all. Lian was just considering whether he should warn him when he entered the crisp sound of striking crack. The youth stepped down and instantly crushed the skull to dust. And then, as if he sensed nothing, he walked over, stepping through the mountain of dust indefinitely. Lian was speechless. With just one step, he crushed the entire enchantment into a mountain of wasted dust. Just then, the youth's step paused. Shilian tensed, wondering if he was about to act, but the youth was only stopped for a moment before continuing to guide Shilian along. After a couple of steps, suddenly there was a pitter-patter from above, as if beads of raindrops were beating down on the surface of an umbrella. Turns out that youth had opened an umbrella and raised it over both of their heads. Although it wasn't the time for it, Shilian couldn't help but praise inwardly that he really was quite, thoughtful. But at the same time, he was also very curious. Wait, is it raining? On the Mystic Black Mountain, within the vast wilderness, somewhere deep in the far distant ranges, there came the long howls of the wolves. Perhaps it was because a slaughter had just occurred on the mountain, but the faint scent of blood was still permeating in the cold, frigid air. Everything about the situation was eerie on the extremes, but the youth held him in one hand and the umbrella on the other hand, as he walked leisurely on, appearing for no reason to be bewitchedly romantic and deeply affectionate. That strange shower came strangely and ended strangely as well. It wasn't long before the dripping sound of raindrops hitting the umbrella ended, and the youth also came to a stop. He seemed to have put away the umbrella, while at the same time he finally let go of Shilian's hand and moved one step closer. The hand had been holding his own this entire way, softly folded a corner of the veil and slowly lifted upwards. Shilian had been waiting for this moment this entire time. He stood still, watching as the clinging red curtain was slowly pulled up. The silk band shot out. It wasn't because the youth exuded a killing aura, but rather because he must be apprehended. Seize him first and talk later. Yet, unexpectedly, when the silk band Rouillet flew out and carried with it a blast of wind, that bright red veil left the youth's hands faltering up, then down. Before Shilian had the chance to see the remnant shadow of the red-robed youth, Rouillet had shot through him. The youth shattered into thousands of silver butterflies, scattering into a breeze of silver twinkle stars. While it wasn't the time for it, after Shilian had backed a couple of steps away, he couldn't help but sigh in awe. This slightly truly was a beautiful, a fantastic dream. Just then, one silver butterfly errantly flew past his eye. When he tried to look closer, however, that single silver butterfly fluttered twice around him, before joining the world of butterflies, melting into a part of the silver that enveloped the sky as the fluttering ether wings to fly into the night. It was a good while before Shilian came back around, and he wondered, so was that youth the ghost groom? In his opinion, he didn't think so. If those wolves on Mount Yujun were his subordinates, why would they appear so terrified upon seeing him? And that enchanted array on the way must have been set up by the ghost groom, yet he so casually crushed it. The more he pondered, the stranger this was. But then Shilian tossed Rouillet over his shoulder and thought, well, whatever he was, could also just be a passerby. I'll leave this for now and focus on the matter at hand. But after scanning around, it turned out that there was a building not far away, standing there somewhere by. Since that youth had brought him here, and the building was so painstakingly hidden inside this enchanting array, Shilian decided he must go inside and take a look. Shilian took a few steps, then halted abruptly. After some thought, he turned back and picked up the veil from the ground. He dusted it off and clutched it in his hands before continuing to make his way to the building. This building was a tall structure with red walls, the bricks and wood appearing rather mottled, much like an aged local town temple. However, in Shilian's experience, this design was most likely a martial god temple. Sure enough, when he looked up, he saw the large, solidly metal words nailed in the top of the entrance. Temple of Mingguang, the martial god of the martial guard, the most Jesus Christ, the martial god of the North, General Ming Guang, was also the General Pei the Ling Wen spoke of in the communication array, whose worship was abundant in the north. No wonder they didn't find any temples of Mingguang nearby, but found the temple of Nanyang. Turns out the temple of Mingguang on Mount Yujun had long since been locked away by any enchantment array. Or by maybe an enchantment array, who knows. Could this ghost groom have anything to do with General Mingguang? However, this General Mingguang was a mighty and unapproachable great heavenly official, flushed with success. Additionally, his statue in the north was very secure. Personally, Shilian didn't think a heavenly official like that would have any connection with a malicious creature like a ghost groom. It wasn't strange to have one's base be overtaken by a malicious creature without, once knowing. He had to wait and see what the truth, what was actually happening. Just make sure that what's going on and blah 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 blah. It wasn't that dusty. It wasn't the dusty air common to an unvisited palace of many years, but rather a faint scent of rot. So again closed the doors behind him to make it seem like no one had entered, then crossed the threshold into the temple. At the center of the great hall was the martial god statue, naturally that of the martial god of the north, General Mingguang. Humanoid objects such as sculptures, puppets, and portraits were easily tainted by the aura of evil. Thus, the first thing Shilian did was to go up and look closely at the martial god statue. After examining it for a while, his consciousness was this divine statue was exquisitely sculptured, wielding a sacred sword and wearing a jade belt. His appearance was handsome with a imposing bearing. There weren't any issues, and the rotting smell didn't come from this divine statue either. Thus Shilian put it out of his head and started to make his way to the back of the great hall. When he turned around, Shilian froze completely and his pupils shrank. A group of women dressed in bright red wedding robes, their heads covered with veils, stood tall before him. The faint stench of rot was exuding from these women. Shilian quickly composed himself, then started counting 1, 2, 3. Well, it started counting 1, 2, 3, 4, until he counted to 17. 17, teen, teen. There were the 17 brides who went missing in the Mount Yujin area. The red on some of the wedding dresses had faded, the robes looking exceedingly old and tattered, so he assumed they were the earliest brides who went missing. Some of the brides were still wearing brand new wedding dresses, and the styles were new too. The smell of aged, rotting corpses was still very light on them, so they must be the ones who went missing recently. Shilian thought for a moment. There was a tragically pale face under the bright red veil, so white that it was faintly glowing green. With the soft light of the moon shining upon it, it was quite horrifying, but the most horrifying part was that while the muscles of the woman's face were already contorted with death, on the face there hung a stiff smile. Shilian pulled off the veil on the next woman, and there were the same curled lips. An entire building filled of dead people, and they were all dressed in wedding robes with smiles on their face. The strange nursery rhymes sung by the child seemed to be ringing in Shilian's ears. New bride, new bride, new bride in red, white, a sedan. Briny tears past the hills, Small not wander the bridal veil. Suddenly, there was a strange sound coming from the outside of the temple. It suddenly was a strange sound, so strange that it was hard to describe, like two rods wrapped in heavy clothes were violently thumping on the forest floor, but also there is something heavy was being pulled with difficulty along the ground. That sound traveled far and came close very quick. It was merely an instant before it reached the entrance of the temple of Mingguang. Creak! The door of the temple of Mingguang opened. Whatever had come, whether it was human or a creature, was most likely to be the ghost groom, and now it had returned. Dun dun dun. There was nowhere to escape at the back of the hall, nor anywhere to hide. Julian's mind spun for a second. Seeing the row of brides, he instantly put on his veil, joining the line and standing still. If there were only 5 to 6 corpses standing there, then of course it'd be easy to see that the number weren't correct. But there were 17 bride corpses here, and unless each one was counted like he did earlier, it'd be difficult to notice someone was mixed in. He'd only just joined the line before he heard the strange thump, 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 thump. Walk in. Julian remained still while he pondered, what exactly is this sound? By the lengthened pauses, it's a bit like a sound of footsteps, but what creature's footsteps sounds like this? It's definitely not the youth who brought me here. He was extremely at ease, and when he walked, he clinked. Suddenly, he realized something, and his heart jumped to his throat. Oh no. My height is wrong. The corpses were all women, but he was very much a man, and was born a notch taller than women, while an extra person couldn't be noticed with a glance. If there was someone particularly tall in the group of corpses, then that was very noticeable. But then again, Julian's mind turned, and he quickly collected himself once more. He certainly was taller than the brides, but the girl Xiao Ying had only bound his hair simply and didn't do much else with it. The brides here were all dressed to the nines, their hairdos shooting for the skies. There were even some who were wearing phoenix crowns and giant hairpieces rising on their heads, so they might not be shorter than him, considering even if he were taller, he shouldn't be that conspicuous. Yeah. Just as he was thinking this, he heard a shh sound that was about 6 meters away from him. A moment later, there was another shh, and this time it was a bit closer. Julian realized that the ghost groom was doing now. It was pulling off the veil of each one of the brides and checking the faces of the corpses one by one. Wham! If he didn't strike now, when would there be a better time? The silk-bound Rouillet shot out and hit the ghost groom squarely. There was a loud thumble of black mist assaulted his face. Julian didn't know whether that evil mist was toxic or not, but since he had no spiritual light to shield his body, he immediately covered his nose and mouth. At the same time, he prompted Rouillet to whirl wildly to vent the air, dispersing the black mist. There was another thump, 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 and when Julian cracked his eyes open, he saw a small, short form by the entrance of the temple flash past. The entrance was thrown up, and a ball of black mist bolted for the forest. Julian made the decision on the spot and chased after it immediately. Yet who knew he hadn't gone far before he saw fires blazing within the woods. The screams and shouts of a rampage came from the distance. Charge! The voice of a youth was practically loud and clear. Catch the ugly freak and exterminate evil for the people. Catch the ugly freak and exterminate evil for the people. We spill the bounty evenly. We'll split it evenly. Let's go, boys, go! It was indeed Xiaopingtou. Shilian inwardly let out a frustrating cry. This group had said they were going to come to the mountain, and they actually did. There was originally an enchanted array concealing this area, but that array had been crashed to smithereens by the youth earlier. And this group, was their blind luck, actually found this place, with it just, upon a second look, the direction the noise came from just so happened to be the direction in which the ghost groom had fled. Shilian grabbed Royer and charged out, shouting, "Don't move!" The group froze for a moment. He was about to say more when he heard Xiao Pingtou inquire inquisitively, "Miss, you were kidnapped by the ghost groom, right? What's your name? We're here to rescue you. You can relax now." Shilian was taken aback, finding this hilarious before remembering that he was still dressed in woman's attire. There was no mirror inside the temple of Nanyang, so he had no idea how he looked right now. But from their reaction, Miss Xiaoying's hand must be depth in their shock. The group actually took him for a real ride, and this Xiaopingtou was probably hoping Shilian would be the 17th bride, so he could go collect the reward money. However, given the situation, he cannot allow these villagers to run amok under any circumstances. Moreover, he couldn't guarantee that the ghost groom had continued to flee. Coincidentally, right then, two black-clad youths came rushing over. Shilian immediately called, "Nanfeng, Fuyao, come aid me." Yet, who knew when those two heard and looked over, they were both taken aback. Then, backed a couple of steps away in unison. Shilian had to ask many times before they came around. Shilian asked, "Did you two come from that direction? Did you run into anything on the way?" "No," Nanfeng replied. "Good," Shilian said. "Fuyao, follow this path immediately and search the surrounding area. Make sure the ghost groom hasn't escaped." Fuyao turned and left when he heard the instructions. Shilian then said, "Nanfeng, you stay and guard the palace, and make sure not a single person leaves. If Fuyao doesn't find the ghost groom on the mountain, then it must be in the crowd right now." Upon hearing this, commotion erupted within the crowd. Xiaopingtou hadn't realized he wasn't a woman by now. Well, he realized it now, by the way. And he was the first to jump. "Not a single one can leave? On what grounds? Are there no laws in this land? Guys, don't listen to them." He hadn't yet landed from his jump when Nanfeng struck out a palm, and a large tree as wide as a man's hug snapped and collapsed. The crowd instantly remembered that this young man chopped things, whether there was a disagreement. Whenever there was a disagreement, by the way, he just chopped shit. He got mad. Chop, chop, chop. If he chopped them like the pillar, and then any form of monetary repayment would be useless, so they just shut the fuck up. Xiaopingtou exclaimed, "You said the ghost groom is among us. Every single one of us has a proper name and family. If you don't believe me, use a torch to light up everyone's face and check individually." "Nanfeng," Shilian called. Nanfeng took the torch from Xiaopingtou and went around to shine it over every single person. Each face was covered in sweat, or nervous, or at loss, or excited, all extremely spirited. Shilian couldn't discern anything, and he came from the crowd. Anything that came from the crowd, basically. "Everyone, I apologize for any offense earlier, but I injured the ghost groom, and I escaped. It definitely couldn't have gone far. My two younger friends here didn't run into it on the way here, so I'm afraid this creature is mixed within the group. Will you please take a good look at each other, see each other's face clearly, and check if there's anyone you don't recognize in the crowd?" When the crowd heard that the ghost groom could be mixed within their own group of people, their blood ran cold. They didn't dare to be careless. They peered at each other, you looking at me and me looking at you. They had looked for a while when there was a sudden yell. "Why are you here?" Shilian's brows shot up, and he rushed over. Who is this? Xiaoping Tou snatched someone else's torch and shined it at the corner of the crowd. This ugly freak! The one in the crowd was. The one he was pointing out was Xiao Ying. Xiao Ying's slanted eyes and crooked nose appeared somewhat contorted under the firelight, and she had her arms raised to block her face, looking like she couldn't bear to be exposed under the firelight glare. I was worried, so I wanted to come up and look. Seeing how alarmed she looked, Lian took away the torch in Xiaoping Tou's hand and turned to the others. How is everyone? The group all shook their head. There isn't anyone we don't know. We've seen everyone. Could it be possessing someone? Nanfeng asked. Lian hummed for a moment. It's doubtful. That was a solid body. Since it was a rat, it's hard to say whether it can change shape, Nanfeng said. While the two were hesitant, Xiaoping Tou was again the first to shout. The ghost group isn't amongst us. Do you see? If you see, then why don't you let us go? Scattered voices agreed here and there, and Lian gave them a sweeping look. Will everyone please stay here in front of the temple of Mingguang and not move even half a step away? The group was about to complain again, but then they saw Nanfeng's cold glare. They didn't dare. Just then, Fu Yao also returned. He reported there's nothing nearby. Gazing at the heavily packed crowd before the temple of Mingguang, Lian slowly said, Then it must be one of these people. And that is finally the end of chapter 3 of Heaven Official's Blessing, also known as TGCF. It was a very long read. Jesus Christ, my throat hurts. But other than that, if you guys been liking it, do the normal YouTube schmidt, you know it, like, comment, subscribe, blah 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 blah. Also, I have a playlist. I mentioned this before, but if you guys want to hear the earlier chapters, you guys can go to that playlist and go and, you know, hear it out. I also have other books I'm reading there, so I have the other playlists if you guys want to check them out. And again, Happy New Year's, Happy Year of the Snake, and well, that's about it. Bye.